So, immigration isn't really something that's widely discussed by people. It's a topic that people tend to avoid because it's so controversial. But we decided to do this documentary because we wanted to get a bigger picture and we wanted to see the truth, because the only way that we're getting our information is from the media, and I don't think the media is always fair. They are in a sense, but it's not. Sometimes it's blown out of proportion. So we wanted to get this bigger, better story to see what everything is like, and we didn't want to just go to one place. We wanted to go to multiple different places to see what everything was like. We wanted to know how people had personal experiences, how people knew other people who had experiences, but we also wanted to know the employees who deal with immigration and all of these citizens that want to become documented.
So we first wanted to go out and see the real action of how this whole process is going. We went to do service hours at the church, or St. Mary's Church, and we worked with them on getting Christmas lists done and understanding how they have a hard time with buying presents and giving to themselves. And then we worked with the U.S. Border Patrol, and we interviewed a couple that had to go through the document process, and we also talked to Deacon Mike on his personal stories of how immigration has impacted his life.
So for the service that we did, we went to St. Mary's Parish, and we kind of worked with the person who does all of the assistance with the program, and her name is Jenny Fleck. So we got to work with Mrs. Fleck.
Help them fill out Christmas forms because some of them don't know how to read or some of them don't know how to write, and so they needed our assistance on how to fill them out
With Christmas and getting gifts for their children and gifts for themselves. And so what we got to do was, because a lot of them have difficulties reading and writing, we got to go around, help them understand everything. I got to use some of my Spanish and help speak to them.
And then we would also review them and go over and make changes when they needed them, because then you give the forms to other people and they have this tree and people draw from the tree.
And overall, we got to work with the people, get to know them a little bit, and just help out with everything that we could.
So the forms started out with their name and then everyone who lived in that building. And then
when they were filling it out, it would be like you put your name, usually you'd put the children first, then the adults second, and you would get to fill out ages and sizes and different styles of clothing that you'd want. And then there was another separate section where you would talk about whether you wanted other things like maybe a Bible or games or toys for the kids. And the adults also had options. A lot of them were clothes or household appliances, which there were examples of different household items that they could request on the back. So it was kind of a guide to help them out if they didn't know what they wanted. So as an extra thing that we decided to do, we went and we interviewed a couple. It happened to be my father and my stepmother, who just recently went through the documentation and the immigration process. And she kind of explained a little bit about the difficulties of it. And although she herself didn't have a super hard time with it because she already had her visa, she did talk about how she knows other people and has friends who definitely struggled with it.
Because she have a kids, and the kids are Americans. Mm-hmm. They're born here. And now they're giving to her a permission for be here. When one of her son is going to be 21 very soon, she got to ask for her mom, and now they have a permission for be here. She is going to be here. Yeah, but this is very difficult for the people that don't come in legally. It's very difficult to get the permission of the resident in here. My another friend of mine, she have more years than me, and she can apply already because she came illegal. She came, I think she came from running. She ran, and she was living before in Los Angeles, mm-hmm. And she came here to Detroit. I don't know how long time ago, but she can apply for her paper because she's illegal. She have kids in here, from American kids too. But the reason that she can be is because she came illegal, you know? She don't came with visa. And now, and you know, it's when you have a kids, it's more difficult too, because the money is a lot of money that you need to pay.
Yeah.
Because it's well, I pay we pay maybe $2,000
For what?
for the papers for all the immigration things.
For
Plus
the actual
the
pay?
lawyer. For me, it was more easy to pay because I have money. I don't have kids. I have a job, very good job, cleaning houses. But for when you have 3 kids, you need to pay the rent. You need to pay all the food for the kids, the school, everything. It's more difficult for these people to have the money for pay the lawyer, all the papers for the application paper for the be legal.
So we got to go out to the Gibraltar Border Patrol and meet with Officer Vetter and Deacon Aaron. First, got to sit in a room. We got to watch their PowerPoint of like their history and what's important to them, and then we moved on and they decided to give us a tour.
So one of the main parts of our tour was going to the detainment center area, which we were told looks very similar to the one down in El Paso. So it was pretty decent sized. It wasn't super big because not a lot of people are kept there during the day, which the cells are fit for the daytime. It's not often that somebody stays there overnight, and if they do, they're provided with blankets and anything that'll make them more comfortable while they're there. There was a toilet there which was separated so you could like have privacy. There was fresh drinking water. You'd be provided with food while you were staying there, and pretty much everything was kept tidy. It was neat. The officers were nice. Everybody's treated with respect there, and there are translators and everything to accommodate for people who aren't good at speaking English.
So one of the main injustices that they like to talk about while we were there was how the media portrays what's actually going on. There was this, I guess, article that went out that they made them drink from toilets, which technically the drinking fountain was on top of the toilet and they had fresh water go through it, so there was not actually drinking from a toilet, but everyone just flipped it around to say that it was straight from the toilet.
So another example of media injustice, which isn't often something you hear about because we like to believe what we hear in the media often, but in this instance, the media takes the topic of immigration and sort of twists it in a way that makes it seem like it's an awful thing and that they're being treated awful and that the employees just don't care, and that's not always the case. So another instance was in El Paso. Deacon Aaron talked about his time there and how he got to be there at a time when there were visitors. So when there are visitors, they take the undocumented citizens and they lock them up. Just for the time being, it is a prison, but it's a prison where they get to wander freely over a certain lot of area, like a plot of land. But when visitors come, they do get locked away. So when they come through, you only hear about the fact that they're being locked up. You don't get to hear that the children get to run around and play and that they're provided with water and snacks all day long and that they get this whole area to themselves. It's just that they can't leave for legal reasons. So the media decided to twist it and make it seem like it was an awful place where they were just being kept in these tiny cells. And one of the officers that was working there at the time was kind of down. He felt awful about it. He was kind of hanging his head low because he felt ashamed for absolutely no reason. He was doing a great thing. He was even rocking one of the babies to sleep while he was there. And he had to get patted on the back and told, there's no reason to feel down because you're not doing anything wrong. You're taking care of these people, you're treating them with kindness, you're even taking care of one of their babies. I mean, he was doing everything right, so there was no reason for him to feel ashamed. And I think that's an injustice that you don't often hear about. And it was something that kind of moved me because I was one of those people who tended to believe what was on the media, and it's not the reality of it, and that's what we wanted to show.
So Overall, we believe that the Border Patrol is doing what is right and what is good for our country.
Because not all cases of immigration are people who are seeking safer refuge. Sometimes it's human trafficking, sometimes it's drug dealing, it can even be terrorism sometimes, and we have to look out for that and make sure that we're keeping our country safe.
They have to protect us and do what's right for the country. We also talked to Deacon Mike on his personal stories of how immigration has impacted his life.
Okay, so I know that in your 10 years of ordained ministry, you've had some experiences of either people who came from unjust situations in their home country or who are in our country, both documented and undocumented now. Are you at liberty to tell us how the immigration crisis entered into your ministry?
Yes. So the first was when I was in the seminary. And in one class I had a young woman, and she didn't speak a lot. She didn't have a whole lot to say. And so she was a great curiosity for me, but I didn't press it. And one day on break, I just got really curious and I just asked her, so tell me about yourself, I'm curious. As she started to talk, I noticed an accent, which I'd never noticed before because she didn't say much. And when she started to speak, I didn't recognize her accent. It clearly wasn't Hispanic. She was darker complected, and it clearly wasn't Hispanic. So I asked her, I says, "Where's home? Are you from here?" And she goes, "No." I said, "Well, where do you live?" It's probably a little forward on my part, but she said, "I'm from Adrian." And I said, "Oh, well, I'm from Monroe. We're not very far away from Adrian." Really, that's very interesting, what are you studying for? What are you going to do with your ministry? And it took her a while, but she ultimately revealed to me that she was a religious sister. She was a nun. She was part of the Adrian Dominican order that runs Siena Heights University. And again, it was even more intriguing to me because she was young. And I said to her, "Oh, okay, so what are you studying?" And we talked a little bit about what she was studying for. She was there for the same reason I was, to get a master's degree in theology. And so we talked a little bit about that. And then I got curious and I asked the question again, "Where's home?" Meaning, I knew it wasn't Adrian, so where's home? And she told me she was from Baghdad, Iraq. Now you gotta remember, in that time, it was in the height of the Iraqi war, and the U.S. was there. The war was raging in Iraq. Baghdad was being bombed nightly, and Christian people in Iraq, Iraqi Christians, we call them in this country Chaldeans, and were being killed, literally being killed in their own churches. Priests were being killed while doing mass. It was terrible. And so I said to her, "Oh my gosh, praise be to God that you're here, right? You're safe here." I was so happy for her, thinking, gosh, I worry, is your family here? No, my family's not here. And it was almost like I felt like I needed to do something to help her get her family here, and it was all about that, right? And then I said to her, "So you must be very relieved that you're here where it's safe." And she says, "No." I said, "Really? Well, what are you going to do with your ministry? Like, what are you going to do when you graduate and your degree is done?" And she says, "I'm going home." And I was shocked. I was absolutely blown away, shocked. And I said, "Why? Why? I don't understand. Why would anybody put themselves in a situation of going into a place that is clearly dangerous at every level? And why would you do that?" And her answer to me was maybe the most, it was probably the most valuable thing to me. And I love the seminary, but it might be the most valuable thing I learned in all the years that I was there, the 5 years I was there. She said, "Because it's my home, and those are my people." and I have to go be with them. I have to minister to them. And I thought to myself, there was, as I've taught here, a mural on my wall in my classroom that said, "Your faith is bigger than your fear." She's a living, breathing example of that. I know she went home. I don't know whatever happened to her. I still find myself praying for her to this day, you know. But there's an example of somebody who was in this country illegally, right? And yet the injustices in her own country. And by the way, she didn't judge, right? The U.S. was there and protecting them, but the U.S. was doing as much damage in her country as the people that were threatening them from the inside, right? So I didn't judge, nor did she. But here's a perfect example to me of how, people have to find their way to this country because of injustices. And yet, she wanted to go back to try to right those injustices. It's a powerful story. Second one's really personal because, I get in conversations with people all the time about, whether or not I really know an undocumented person. And the answer is that I do. So this is a man from El Salvador, and he's young. He's probably maybe 30 years old, roughly. He left an impoverished situation. He left a situation in his family that isn't much unlike the situations in our own families. His dad was an alcoholic. His mom, was really trying to hold the family together. There was a lot of dysfunction in the family. We find that here, except that they were very poor. And, the situation in El Salvador was desperate. And he just felt like if he didn't break free of that he was going to get caught in the same trap that his dad got caught in and his brothers got caught in. And the history of that family would never change. And so he took a risk and he came here to this country illegally. I never asked him how. I never asked him where. I figured that to some extent that's irrelevant, right? God put him in my life where he was in North Carolina. And from my perspective, everything before that, was a memory he was trying to put behind him, right? He had a new life. So where he came into my life is I have a middle daughter who, all my daughters went here at SMCC, and this is my middle daughter, and when she graduated, she had a very dear friend, her closest friend of any in the school, and they remained friends after high school, very close friends, but they both went their separate ways. And, her friend went to North Carolina with her family who moved there, and then she went off to college down there, and then but they kept very much in touch, And sometime after they graduated from college, her friend announced that she was engaged. She had met this man, and they were going to get married. My daughter was all excited for her, and they got married. But the wedding was different. There wasn't a big wedding. There wasn't a lot of hullabaloo. There wasn't a lot of noise made. It wasn't the typical kind of, wow, we're going to have engagement parties and all that. It was a very small family affair. Even my daughter wasn't invited to this wedding, which is very interesting. Well, it turns out the reason is because the young man that she was going to marry was this undocumented man, and who was able to get a marriage license, surprisingly. That I suppose the laws of North Carolina are such that he was able to do that. But it was a very small family wedding. And they lived very happily. They had a young son, a great kid, and about 5-6 years into their marriage, she developed a very, very rare form of cancer. I've never heard of it. Very few people in the country get it. A handful of people, universities don't know a lot about this kind of cancer. And so she went into an experimental program, and honestly, she lived very short period of time, and tragically, she died a very painful death, and it was in that time that I kind of entered back into their life, you know. And then when she died, I was asked to do the funeral, and I went to North Carolina, and I celebrated her life with her family, and ever since then, you know, I go to North Carolina a few times a year, and every time I go, he's now part of their family. His name is Ovidio, and he's very much part of their family. I have been to this man's house, picnics there. You know, we go out to eat all the time, and he's a great guy. Works very hard. You know, for years he was a general laborer. You know, so there I learned slowly over time that there's a community of undocumented aliens in North Carolina, just like that there is here. They don't generally go around filling out job applications for all the reasons we already know. The same reasons they don't do parish registrations at parishes, right? And so they do general labor, right? And so a lot of people will hire them to do work around the house, and they do great work. They sadly underprice their work because much of it is done for cash. And they don't want, you know, they can't complete tax forms or anything of that nature. And so they live in this subculture, but they're hard-working people. They're good people. And that's how I found him, you know. Ultimately, he found a job with a company. Again, I didn't ask any questions. What I do know is that the man works very hard. That man works like a dog. He's a good dad. I pray someday he'll be a good husband again. But the question has been asked. I haven't asked it, but I've asked it of his late wife's family. Why doesn't he just become a legal citizen now? And the answer was troubling to me, you know. Said, well, you know, he fears in this culture right now, especially, he fears that if he were to try this, he would be sent home and separated from his son. He fears that more than anything. And he won't let that happen, you know. And then secondly, and this really troubles me maybe even more than the first, is he said that if he attempts it, he fears what would happen to his family back in El Salvador. That there has been some history, some evidence of people's families being hurt. I don't know by who. I never asked any questions. And he fears for his family. Whatever that means. I don't know what that means. But I can't even imagine, I can't wrap my head around having to be concerned about that, right? As some sort of a risk. But he fears it. It's real to him. Whether it's real or not, doesn't matter. It's real to him, you know. So he's become, I will see him in a couple of months here. I've talked to him on the phone, you know. He's a friend. I know how he got here is controversial. I know all of that. But for me, anyway, he's just a good friend and somebody God brought into my life for all the right reasons, you know. And I don't judge him. And I don't think he mistrusts me. And I don't know. I pray for a world where that's the kind of justice that we can have. Even though I'm all about safe borders, I'm all about that. You know, there are people behind this issue, real people. I know them. I've met them. And though I'm not powerful enough to fix this, I can fix it in some ways by ministering to the people that God puts into my life along the way. And I think that's one thing all of us can do about this immigration crisis. When we start to think about how small we are, you know, we're one person away from making it better. So, hope that answers it.